Good afternoon. Welcome to this month's Discovery Lecture Series. Selfies are one of the most common user-generated digital content among the social media. So today we fortunately have Dr. Brian O'Connor, professor, photographer, and a thinker, and information scientist. So his topic today is Know Thy Selfie, Provocations on Digital Photography and Public Knowledge. Dr. O'Connor.
Oh, I don't know how many people have said, I want to hear about how to make better selfies. If you have to have help making selfies, you should probably check yourself in someplace. I'm just going to throw out almost a shotgun blast of ideas. Hopefully we'll have some conversation afterwards. If not, you'll have to look at a bunch of my selfies. So you better get ready to talk. This was a picture a couple of years ago from Mars. The Mars rover Curiosity self-initiated a selfie from off the Earth. The rover group sent it to Oxford English dictionary people so that they would have proof that selfies were a big deal. Know Thy Selfie comes from this nos thuse auton, which is a Greek phrase translating first an Egyptian phrase, and then it was translated from Greek into Latin. Almost every Greek philosopher is credited with having used or even invented this phrase. It's been around for a while. Know thyself. Now, it's only 3 words, but it has been interpreted differently over the centuries. In Egypt, it evidently was in temples, meaning you should know your place. I'm the god, you're the human. Various Greek philosophers used it to mean, well, you have to think about the mind-body duality and concentrate on the mind. That's not so popular anymore. The selfies that we tend to use now are in fact changing the way we spatialize ourselves, conceptualize ourselves within our daily lives. I want to come around to that. But you can't just make a nice, quick, logical argument in a lunchtime lecture. So, we'll skip around a little bit. The very first photograph made was in fact what we would think of as a selfie. In 1839, the French government basically awarded the first patent for a working photographic process. 2 or 3 months, it depends on whose diary you read later. Robert Cornelius, a Dutch immigrant to Philadelphia, made a wooden box, got the lens from a pair of opera glasses, and took this photograph, the first photograph of a recognizable person, and it was himself. This is actually in the Library of Congress right now. Well, no, this one isn't. It's on the screen here. The original. Whoops, go back to that. The important thing here, and one thing I want to keep coming back to, is the change in the infrastructure. When Cornelius made this, photography required, depending on what process you were using, coating either glass or metal with chemistry in a dark room, loading it into a camera, which would maybe be like this size, going out, standing in this case, his backyard for 15 minutes. He had a little squeeze bulb that activated the shutter on the camera. which is an odd notion, thinking of shutters in those days. But at any rate, who knows how much time, more than a few seconds, coating the substrate for the photo, 15 minutes of exposure, and then many more minutes / hours to get the image to show up and all on the substrate. I dare say, if you had to do this every time you were taking pictures of you and your girlfriend at the mall, there wouldn't be the 1.2 trillion selfies that were estimated for last year. Sciencey people did this too. This is in the early 1920s on top of a building in New York City. These guys have a wide-angle camera, and a few days later, they got this print from it. And it's so nice to see that nearly a century ago, arms were prominent in the picture. A little bit of a change in the process here. This is, I don't know how well, this is not really great projection. Not to complain too much, but this is a bunch of guys, a bunch of men in the construction battalion on their way to get on their ship on the way to Normandy during World War II. And it was shot by a US Navy photographer. It was published many months later in the cruise log for the battalion. A year after he received it, my dad wrote me and drew an arrow to himself, turning a public document from the US government into a selfie, or as I said, he selfified it by writing me on there, right on the picture, not on the back of the picture. Beginning the breakdown of the boundary between some other author and myself as author. I have to confess that when I saw this picture in the original cruise log from my dad, and my mom told my 3-year-old self that that was my daddy, I immediately took a pencil and drew all over it, and that didn't go over so well. We had to have it remade. Have you all seen this picture? Obama with some unknown female European leader. That's the way she was treated in most of the press. Jeff Nunberg, a linguist at Berkeley, talks about this particular image in his essay, suggesting that selfie should be the word of the year. I love this. Selfies have unleashed a torrent of portentous yammer and invective. How many people, oh, narcissism. So what? What's interesting is what happened almost immediately after publication of this. Since the photo was at Nelson Mandela's funeral, and people thought, well, you shouldn't take selfies at a funeral. And started saying, well, let's put that image on top of other not so great images. This one is actually quite fascinating to me. I was at the museum at Kent State 2 years ago. First time I've ever been in a museum where I couldn't go through the whole thing because it was just too emotional because of the photos. But you see what's happened here is that somebody else has authored another document, taking 2 documents that they did not originally author and making a third out of them. This is more typical, of course, of selfies. friend and colleague, Rich Anderson. He's also head of computing security for UNT Systems, so don't do anything has to be about computing. Shot this in New York. Those arms again. This is a pretty good picture. The Statue of Liberty, a young couple, and the American flag, all in the same image of a selfie taking event. I do have, I suppose I should get on camera for this, but one reason to think about selfies will come up with this. I have a selfie stick. I also have an old-fashioned selfie on it. You have to have a stick for your selfie. Pretty much until photography came around, the only way you could see images of yourself and share those images was to have somebody paint a picture, carve a wooden block and make ink prints. If you were lucky, you could have someone make a death mask of you, and that would be pretty close in detail, but it wouldn't do you much good, unless the gods to whom you pray like death masks. This is actually a friend of mine who was an artist in 1967 drew a sketch of me, and then I made a wooden block out of this in the Hopkins Center at Dartmouth College. We made several printing runs with that. And people looking at it at the time said it looked like me. And it vaguely does. The nose is a little nicer than my own nose. And the hair is longer there than it is now. But there's no way you could make a one-to-one correspondence between that face and the face, either the face I have now or the face I had then. Not every little beard hair is in place. Not every twinkle in my eye shows up. We'll come back to this several times, but again, this idea of the mechanism of seeing oneself and being able to share that has been enormously cumbersome until 1839 with the patenting of the first photographic process. And of course, yes, I know there are exceptions. If you're really rich and you have a court painter, no problem. I don't want to belabor selfies too much. I do want to get to public knowledge, but selfie, the subject is the self. Oh, nice. Do you want the selfie stick to do?
No, it's okay. I used my arm.
If you go around with a selfie stick with nothing on it, it's kind of that would be real narcissism. Hold on a second. I hope the people in YouTube land are enjoying the
They're enjoying.
It's not absolutely necessary that you have a digital camera to do selfies. We saw Robert Cornelius. But the common understanding now, of course, is digital camera. You take the picture and put it onto some form of social media. That may be a time lag social media. You want to go in and edit it a little bit, or you may just upload it directly while shooting. But the making of it and the subject are the self. There are lots of interesting little essays one finds around about, well, what if there are two people? Is it a euphy, a toofy? Wait a minute, how did I get out of full screen?
Press the middle button.
No, that's not the right one.
Is there a top button?
I could cheat here, I suppose. Can't see it.
Yeah, on the left-hand side, Brian.
Oh, yeah,
think
I
you're
see it.
going to- Set up for a round.
Okay. I don't have my glasses are fashionable, but not very functional. How did we get to this slide? Okay. We will jump to the slide. So what I want to argue in part of this explosion of ideas, that the quantitative change in the infrastructure, the mechanism of producing and distributing these things yields a qualitative change in several areas. Who is an author? What counts as authorship? Who's a publisher? What does vetting mean? Until very recently, if you wanted to publish something without going through a publisher, well, you had to get out a Mimeo machine, or you had to get out a Xerox machine and hand things out on the street corner or post them up on utility poles. That's not a totally non-functional system, but it's it puts a lot of mechanism between you and getting published. We're generally using for author and authorship the notion of anyone who causes something to flourish, something come into being or something to flourish. So a gardener is an author, a teacher is an author. What counts as authorship? In the past, if you called yourself an author, you were probably doing something more than writing thank you notes to your grandmother for a birthday present. Although, of course, you were authoring that letter. Taking photographs that showed up in the family album and were looked at once a year was a form of authorship, but you would not call yourself an author for doing just that. Now, but now there are literally billions of authors around. This raises the question, well, which are the ones I should pay attention to? Who gets to say that you're a qualified author, that you're a good author for something? Okay, I want to jump in a slightly different direction, talking about mechanism. I spent a lot of years as a professional photographer and a filmmaker. And my son got married last summer. And, he's the one that looks just like me. My older son is next to him with the family dog. I showed up at this. I was not the wedding photographer. I refused to be wedding photographer for anybody. But I did have 3 professional cameras with me, and I have my iPhone. I shot 700 photos with the iPhone, and about 100 with each of the other cameras. And in many cases, I was shooting with the iPhone and the camera, one of the other cameras at the same time. Many of the people there actually like the iPhone photos because they're more casual. Despite my being a formal kind of guy, I like casual photos. There's a little joke. I know it's little, but you can smile. So my point here is that selfies and the mechanisms of selfies are not just crappy little pictures, so you take the fun thing, oh, here we are at the Statue of Liberty. If you go to, say, B&H, camera company, one of the larger suppliers in the world, these are just the categories of stuff you can stick onto your mobile phone to make professional photographs. including one of my favorites is microscopes. High quality microscopes for $50, $100, $150. Mark, I don't know if you've seen this, the Hasselblad camera that fits on to Hasselblad's one of the best brands. For those of you who aren't in the thousands of dollars to throw away on mobile imaging, Kodak makes a really nice 10-to-1 optical zoom, 16 megapixel still photos, 1080p. Oh, somebody wishing me well. Video, and comes with a built-in Wi-Fi, so you control it from your iPhone, but it doesn't have to be on there. And it's $80. Again, that diminution and the all costs in all senses, costs of time, costs of equipment, costs of other resources to make a really good image. You know what we need in here? My son now, I have two sons. The younger son, who's you saw getting married, is running ultra marathons, and to track himself on his runs, his training runs, he has a drone that has a controller. It's a button. It goes up and sits 15 feet behind him and 20 feet in the air and tracks him wherever he runs. And I'm thinking Andrea needs that to keep either that or you make me stand behind a podium. If you want to shoot cool video for only $456.95, you can get a rig that'll give you a whole lot of professional options. $456 sounds like a lot to spend on your iPhone, but in 1974 I spent $25,000 on a 16mm camera, which could not, under the very best of circumstances, produce an image anywhere near the quality that your iPhone can produce for video. So just think of that. I mean, you don't have to be professional with your equipment. It's the ideas that become professional. Selfies, let's just go nuts with selfies. Just going back to some of the things we were thinking about, speed, service. You know, if you want to write a book, you usually have to get a contract. That means you're going to spend a couple of months, years prepping, get an editor to bring it to the editorial board, maybe you get the contract. If you want to have a gallery show of your photos, it's probably going to take you 6 months to a year to get the get scheduled, get accepted, get scheduled, get everything mounted. It's going to take some time and money. But if you want to put stuff up on Flickr or Instagram, you don't have to do that. You don't have to get anybody's permission. You don't have to get anybody's buy-in. That's great on the one hand. On the other hand, with all the literally millions of sites anyone could go to, how one gets to where one wants to be becomes a question. I have here for the audience, there's the ease of going beyond what you might think you want to look for. For you, as the originator of some particular piece, there's delight, hey, I can do this. There's terror because you don't know what's going to happen to your image. You might end up looking awful. Talked about authorship causing to flourish, refostering earlier authors. I might go back and re-author something I did a couple of years ago, put it together, change the lighting, change the cropping, put it to a different use. I should tell the camera person and the audience. As early as kindergarten, the teachers were telling my parents, he just fidgets too much. The barber, first time I went to get a haircut, says to my dad, Don, if you can't get him to sit still, I'm just going to have to give up. Collaborative authorship, both knowing and unwitting. Whoever shot the image of Obama with the selfie probably had no idea it was going to end up embedded in Kent State and Auschwitz. I thought this was kind of a lovely little bit of selfie. Collaborative authorship. This might seem like a tiny thing, but it both meant a lot to me emotionally and to thinking about photos these days. I happened to be in New Hampshire in 2012 visiting my mom, and until she died 2 years after that, she lived in the house that I'd grown up with. We moved there in 1950. And I had put up a picture on Facebook of the snowplow going by our house. And Cheryl Vergas, whom I haven't seen since 1967, said, oh, Brian, if you're still at your mom's house, can you run up the street and get a picture of our house? She hasn't lived there in 40 years, but I ran up the street and I got the picture and put it up for her. So on her request, I acted as the mechanism of production for a photo. So we have collaborative authorship of a lovely little memory for her, an intriguing memory for me because I hadn't thought of that house or her in 40 plus years. I don't really like the siding that the new owners have put on. Again, the dissolution between producers and users. Private documents and public documents start collapsing. Not all of these are necessarily for a lot of people. It doesn't mean everything you do you want everyone in the world to see. Gotta catch my breath on this one. After my father died, I was walking around the town I grew up in, and I got a selfie, not with my iPhone, but with a little Nikon balanced on top of a fire hydrant, of me sitting on these steps of the Currier Art Museum. And then I remembered afterwards that I had a picture in my collection of my father and me at 1 year old sitting in exactly that same place. So I made this up just for myself, and I kept it on my Flickr account, and with no tags on it, but a few people who just follow my Flickr images really liked it and urged me to put it up a couple of other places. I still don't have tags on it. I don't like tagging stuff. But it means a lot to me. I mean, even now it chokes me up. So, one can author for one's later self. It would be a sad thing if we remained the same self throughout our lives. I think selfies bring up a whole set of philosophical issues. What's his name? Benjamin talks about the whole idea of reproducibility of art. What happens to the gravitas of the Mona Lisa if you can buy a calendar for $3 at Barnes and Noble that has a picture of the Mona Lisa on it. Well, does something really need to have that gravity, that gravitas of it having taken a long time and a lot of effort or a lot of machinery to make the thing? Is that what makes it wonderful? Is that what makes it meaningful? Or is it okay? Now, there is a nice little counter argument one could make that while the calendar picture isn't going to look just like the Mona Lisa, because you're not seeing the way the brush strokes have laid the paint down in almost a sculptural 3D way on the canvas. And nowadays, if you go to the Louvre and you look, it's behind glass. I'm pretty sure whoever it was that painted it, a joke, it's an art history test joke, did not keep it behind glass. Nowadays, you can do all sorts of stuff to the Mona Lisa. I don't know if Mark, have you ever noticed, if you go to the Louvre, their official photo of the Mona Lisa actually has the shadow of the frame down onto the canvas part. Just a little one, but that seems odd to me. You'd think they would have been better than, unless they do that as kind of a watermark that people realize. I'm pointing at the camera. This is another personal thing. I tried to get rid of most of the selfies that I had. When my mom died, a couple of years after my dad, I did another little triptych. The photo on the left here is my parents standing in front of the public library in Manchester, New Hampshire in 1946, walking home from church. I asked my dad, you work 6 days a week. Were you and mom like running home to try to make babies? I mean, this was after all 1946, baby boom. And he said, yes, of course. He was a rather informal guy. Here they are years later at their favorite restaurant in New Hampshire's little diner where they actually ate every day. And I put this up for the restaurant because this is the booth they always sat at. And the restaurant had sent flowers to my mom's funeral. They're also an ice cream company. They sent a 5-gallon ice cream container, sent with flowers. And so that restaurant had this up on their site. As a little memorial to my parents. But this comes back to selfiness and to production. My father asked his mother to take this photo. She shot it with my dad's camera, which is an Argus C3, the first prosumer 35mm camera. It took 3 months for them to shoot all the images on that roll of film, which was about 24 images. My father says he sent it away to a company in New York. 12 days later, a little box of pictures came back. So again, the time and the effort and the money involved. The camera was 2 weeks' wages for my dad. These days, nobody would find it reasonable to think, oh, I'm going to take a picture over down by the library. It'll be back. Let's see, it'll take me 2 more months to stop taking pictures. The camera was and then I'll have somebody print them, then I'll look at them. And that, even most professionals wouldn't do that. You would do that maybe if you were in some kind of mood to do a sick recreation of photography around times. This is an iPhone. No, this is the first GoPro camera that I owned. Interestingly, LL Bean used to sell GoPros when they first came out. I was able to buy one for only $80 because they made them in silver and in pink. And no guys were buying the pink one. I was like, what the hell, I'll buy the pink one for $80. It's got the same sensor in it. This idea that we have less mechanism and stuff, less doing in the way, means we can make situational documents. We don't have to work for a year, 2 years, 3 years at something because so many people are going to want it. It's like the picture of my parents. It worked for a few people, maybe 100 people. For 2 weeks it was up on a website. Last week I was trying to get some toilet cleaner at Albertsons, and they had a different kind from what we usually buy. So I took a picture of it, texted it to my sweetheart, and a lovely sweetheart message. Is this the toilet cleaner? It was a useful document for the two of us for a very short time. I still have it on my phone if you want to look at it. But, this idea of situational usefulness, the idea that things may not be all that great now. They may be wonderful now, not great for 15 years, and then some historian wants to know, well, did they ever sell this at Albertsons? So we can sort of challenge this singular nature of most documents that were published with a larger sort of time friction on. I had to get the word fetish in here sometimes. I don't think that's a bad word. I've been warned not to use bad words since this is going on YouTube. I asked for the list of bad words, but nobody could give me such a list. So. Singular. That's a bad word. I better get out of here. Here's something, you've probably all seen stories like this. Iranian women doing selfies, taking off hijabs. One of my favorites was people in Palestine taking photos of the tear gas canisters that were being lobbed against them, and then putting them up online, and people in Ferguson saying, oh, those are the same canisters they're lobbing on us. The people in Palestine said, don't put water on, you people in Ferguson. The best thing to do is go to McDonald's. This is the Palestinians telling the people in Ferguson, go to McDonald's because their milkshakes are the best thing for getting the tear gas off your face. In more or less immediate use of good documentary production, those will probably be data in somebody's dissertation someday. We don't know. Probably it's not going to be published in a book of war photographs. Going beyond the self. Another example, this woman who had skin problems and depression just set up a project looking at herself every day and forcing herself to do that, meditate. Skin gets better, she gets better. Is seduces a bad word?
It's okay.
Um, this is in the larger sense. You know, if you're an author of any type of document and you want somebody else to look at it, you want it to be done in a way that they're going to be able to read or view it or hear it. Talking about blocking water. This idea of the self, thinking of the self, how are we in our space? How are we defined with relationship to others? These are all questions that we can ask around the production of selfie. Does narcissism come into it? Probably. Is that all bad? Probably not. Maybe it is. Maybe it's awful. Maybe it's narcissistic selfies are the worst thing in the world, but if there are 1.2 trillion of them made in a year, that still makes it worth studying, doesn't it? I don't think it does. There's always boundary between subject and object. Just before coming here, and I didn't have time to put in PowerPoint, a guy I know does fishing at North Lake Park put up a great selfie video. He's got his left hand, he's got his phone in his right hand, and he's reaching down, he pulls up a 6-foot-long rat snake. They're not poisonous, but they could bite you. So he's like this, and it's great. He keeps the head right in the center of the image even while it's moving around. That idea that he made the imaging a part of the activity that he was doing. Again, more blurring of what's happening in the production of these images. Wow. That time it worked to point. A little humor. Stormtrooper selfie, because they can't ever hit anything. Another way of saying those same things. I suppose we can make the PowerPoint available if someone wants, or I do have a more formal article on this I can put up the link to. I like this idea of not just a continuum, but a sphere of documents produced out of any one or any set of selfies as a possibility. Casual. My son and daughter-in-law are going to be doing a 24-hour race in Latvia in June. And it's going to be out in the woods and the mountains. So my son bought these shoes that have little plastic plates inside to keep your ankles from getting beat up by trees and rocks. But he was really wanting to show me they're less than 12 ounces, 11.252 ounces. So instead of calling me up and telling me all this stuff and reading the specs, just take a picture. And I know for some of you, younger folks, of course that's what you do. But this is not something that happened very often in olden days, like 5 to 10 years ago. Nice. Been making a stand-up paddleboard for my son, and when he was 3 years old, he came up with Zoodark as a name for the creatures that live in the hills above Berkeley. They're half monster and half construction machine, and they kidnap children in the night and try to kill them, but the children always get away because the Zoodarks are stupid. So the name of his paddleboard is Zoodark. And since my first initial is B, I have B as my mark for my boats. He will never see this because it's on the interior of the boat. I guess if he crashes it and breaks to pieces, he could see it. So I thought he should know what's in here. Which is like a little kid or an artist. There's no reason he has to know it, but I want him to know it. Artists are just sick, narcissistic. I was going to say, unlike olden days, but in a sense, we've just done this. We look at the Robert Cornelius portrait, and we've recreated it. In fact, it's multiply recreated. I downloaded about a 50 megabyte image from Library of Congress site. That was way too big to stick into the PowerPoint, so I downsized it. Did a few other things to the contrast. Library of Congress doesn't do a very good job of imaging their photos. But this idea that in the digital era, we can just keep doing more things, more than all those images sitting in shoeboxes would have done. I'm guessing most of you don't keep your iPhones in a shoebox just to keep the photos there. This has some moderate interest. Uh-oh. I'm talking so boringly. Just see if I want to sign your dissertation. That was humor. Yes, it was humor. This is on the left side is Rafi Karkonen. Used to be the head of research at Twitter. Was the maid of honor at my older son's wedding. He wasn't the best man. He's actually known my daughter-in-law 20 minutes longer than he's known my son. They were all at MIT together. So it was decided he should be the maid of honor. He was head of research at Twitter. Here he is getting a selfie with the president of Armenia. That's not so interesting as his wife's comment at the wedding. If you dare tweet out images during the wedding, I will, and then something not nice to repeat. So even people from Twitter have to restrain themselves and stuff. It's bad when even the computer is getting tired of the talk. More ways of saying that same thing, just hoping one of these will kind of grab onto your brain somewhere. Let's skip this. I have to put this in. This is the, I love this one because Michael Collins, the astronaut who photographed this, is then the only human, living or dead, not contained in the frame of the picture. You could argue a little bit that people on the dark side of the Earth maybe aren't contained in the picture, but that's a cute way of thinking about imaging. Now I want to go back. So why does any of this matter? Hopefully it's self-evident, but I want to go to one of my favorite writers in the arena of photography. Oliver Wendell Holmes, a physician, a poet, essayist. When he was a physician, he was in a 10-year feud with the surgeons in his hospital. They argued they didn't have to wash their hands between surgeries because surgeons are gentlemen, and gentlemen do not carry germs. Which is kind of cool if it were true. Holmes was also, he was on the faculty at Dartmouth College in the 19th century. In 1859, he wrote the best piece on photography I have ever read. I highly recommend it to anybody interested in any way in photography. But one of his phrases is the title for the book I'm working on now, Mirror with a Memory. For the first time with photography, starting, let's say, 1839, so not even 2 centuries yet, have we had a communication mechanism in which we can see the visual data from another time and another place. Even a realist painter, photorealist painter, we can't tell. Is that blade of grass the one that was really there? Was it really that green, or was there a little bald spot in the lawn there in that painting? With photography, we at least have the opportunity, although it's not always available or taken advantage of, but we can say we know what the color value was, what the brightness value was of every point in an image. Before photography, you had to carve a block, get a painting. You could look at yourself in a reflecting pool, but when you moved away, your picture wasn't there. And you couldn't bring your 10-year-old reflecting pool image along with you, and when you're 25, look at that 10-year-old image. But now you can. What does that do? I didn't put any of it down here, but Holmes actually talked about how someday we would need great libraries with large stack shelves, just like for books, but for photographs, because people would want photographs of so many things in their lives. He said that form is henceforth divorced from matter. We didn't have to have a particular chunk of matter in order to know what its form is now or was at the time of the image being made. My son has summarized Holmes and a lot of our other work in saying that photographs are photons in, photons out. We have values for what was at some part of the universe at some particular time. That doesn't mean we have all context. What year was this photo taken? Doesn't tell us. We know when he died, so we would guess it would be before that, although for a couple of decades people were really into taking photographs of dead relatives, even standing them up. If a fireman died, they'd put him in a fireman's uniform. The photographers even had photo prints of opened eyes that they would tape onto the closed lids. And this might not even be a photo of Oliver Wendell Holmes. I mean, I could be trying to fool you. But it is photon data from some guy. Trust me, I'm a professional. Did you see that? 1859. Actually, 1859 is when the article. I'll just throw these out. I'm almost not going to mention them, but just to get you thinking. For so long, the word has been thought to be the sine qua non of thinking. But if you read neurologists like Antonio Damasio, who talks about images being the primary aspect of the brain, over 30% of the neocortex is devoted to processing images. The philosopher Paul Churchland's book from the 90s, Engine of Reason, Seat of the Soul, the whole book is worth reading because it's, okay, now that we know more about the brain, what does that do for our understanding of philosophy? But his section on vision is quite astonishing. The psychologist Rudolf Arnheim wrote a book, Visual Thinking, again looking at how many cultures have existed either entirely or mostly without writing or some such form of representation. Thinking about selfies and narcissism, I was talking last night with my son about mirror neurons, and we know some of the neurons firing in our heads enable us to kind of feed what we see other people doing into the muscle memory in our own bodies. When I used to run races, once a week I would run past a couple of blocks worth of storefronts with a lot of glass so I could just check my form. And I found out that's a lot of high school cross-country coaches do the same. Now, of course, you can have yourself videoed. One could think of selfies as a way of modeling our own behavior to ourselves. This is not to say it's not fun to take selfies. It's like just useful to say, does this shirt go with this tie? You'd think, I've been projector boy since 4th grade. You'd think I would have this down. Since the title of this piece is about public knowledge, I did want to mention Patrick Wilson, probably the preeminent philosopher of our field. He says that public knowledge is the best view of the world we can construct with what's available to us, both the evidence and our processes for understanding, evaluating, critiquing that evidence. I would argue having a lot more stuff and a lot more modalities, not just print, is on the one hand great, on the other hand awful. We have the interesting situation of being in this explosion, this information overload, to use a term from a couple decades ago. I should point out Patrick Wilson, when he did his PhD in philosophy at Berkeley, wanted to do a dissertation on movies and particularly movie reviews and how they represented movies. He was told that movies are not an appropriate topic of philosophy. So he wrote on the nature of meaning. That attitude still holds in a lot of academia. Hopefully we're making some inroads that it doesn't matter. Oral cultures matter. Selfies may matter. Audio matter. But one of Wilson's colleagues had another lovely phrase that I like, and I'd like to throw into here, so we'll have a couple minutes for discussion. The information overload is not a function of having too much information. It's a function of having inadequate means of navigating the information. Well, I think we'll end with this. This was the end slide. This is Bacon's self-portrait with an image almost as dark as Bacon's of myself, shooting myself in Bacon's glass frame. Again, I'm pretty sure when Bacon did this, he didn't paint it with the glass in mind. It'd be kind of hard to put the sheet of glass and paint. A little joke. Maybe I should do a big joke. The next slide just says thank you. Wait a minute. Almost forgot. Hold on, this will only take a second. Shouldn't hurt.
Where's John?
Okay. All right, thank you. I didn't say too many bad words, right?
Just the one.
So we have lights, lights, camera, action. Any thoughts? Any complaints? All right, thank you. I like my Calvin Klein T-shirt. It's from Marty McFly.
Fair use, like for instance.
Wait, I'm sorry.
Oh, was a question about fair use. Like for instance, if you take a picture of standing in front of the Mona Lisa and you post it on Facebook, and you're really not making any profit.
Any thoughts?
Would that be considered for sure fair use? Or like,
Oh,
especially like if
I had a good answer until you said for sure. Yeah, and the whole world seems to be becoming more litigious, and maybe an interesting part of that answer. My frequent co-author Jody Cairns and I are putting together a piece for the next Document Academy on bad photographs. For several years, each year we've done bad words, and last year we asked people on Facebook to send us bad words and the alternatives they were taught. Like you can't say, please, you. But, you know, your parents would not wash your mouth out with soap if you said yuck food. This interesting little social contract that we all know what you're trying to say, but if you don't exactly say that, but you say this other thing, then it's okay. So this year we're doing bad photographs. Interestingly, nobody has said genitalia in use or anything like that. They've sent us bad photographs. One woman sent a photo of when she was 20 pounds heavier than she is now, but she's in a bikini, and she said, I could shoot my husband for taking this. That's a bad photo. So there's this change in the level of specificity, but a lot of other people said a picture that's a little out of focus, a picture that's got too many reflections. So if you went to the Louvre and you shot the Mona Lisa, you should make sure that you've got a little bit of light reflection in the glass so that it doesn't look like a real nice copy of it. A lot of other people said I should say that's a really good thing about iPhones. Since the 60s, you know, I was a Greek and Latin literature major, among other things, at Dartmouth. And we would go down to Cambridge, to Harvard, to their museum to work on items in their collections. And then we would go over to the Boston Museum of Fine Arts, which has some of the best Greek, Roman, Egyptian artwork in the U.S. And last year I happened to be in Boston, and my partner was at a conference at Tufts on water in ancient culture. And they had arranged for a tour of the new display of the Greek and Roman stuff. And it's really clever. They've got micro lighting of all the objects. Many of them are behind glass, and there's no way you can take a photo of the whole object without having the reflections of these little lights, unless if you take out your iPhone and you put it right on the glass, you get gorgeous photos, no reflections, and they're better than anything I ever shot on film back in the 60s or in the 70s, because the cameras are so good, and because you've got a nice flat surface shooting from which you're shooting the images. But don't cite me as evidence in your court case. It seems unlikely with over 1 trillion selfies a year that somebody's going to find yours shot of the Mona Lisa. Yeah. But
I was thinking as you were talking about the value aspect of selfies, or in particular, I was thinking about how in psychometrics, a little more my field, we talk about judgments versus ratings. Judgments are when many of us were behind the camera and taking what we thought people wanted, versus ratings are what do I think about stuff. And selfies are a little more, it feels like along the line of ratings of value to me. And I went to get this example of, who is the picture of value to. This was one that Dr. O'Connor brought back to me several months ago.
do you want to bring it up here?
That probably looks like a normal, nice photograph to many of you. And I wonder if you could talk about the value of this to you, because somehow it's related to what we call selfies, or at least the reason people take selfies, I think.
This actually brings up another thing about photographs in general. We could say any photograph you take situates you as the photographer at a time and place, and it must have had some value, very broadly defined to you.
Somehow it's related to what we call selfies, or at least.
So that even if you're not in the picture, this actually brings up another. It could be used to calculate where you were, what means something to you. Do any of you besides Gerald recognize this? Do you have any idea what it is? It's a room with a carpet. Well, I should preface this with saying most of my colleagues think of me as not caring much for libraries and digital stuff. Great. But this is sort of the central part of the reading room at Baker Library, the library at Dartmouth College, where we were both students. I don't know, in your day, did the president sit here and welcome you into the college? Yeah. So just as the place of that ceremonial welcome into the community of the longest continuously open higher education place in the country. Harvard's 100 years older, but they had to close for the revolution. Dartmouth was too far away. And this is probably, I'm getting goosebumps. This is an emotional broadside.
That's why I brought it.
But sitting, watching a couple feet of snow come down, there are actually fireplaces in the library. I have a fire going, sitting there in a nice big leather chair, looking at the snow coming down, and reading in a gorgeous room, not just gorgeous to look at, but extraordinarily comfortable to be in. And for several years I had tried to photograph it in ways that made sense to me. It took a long time, and finally I just started shooting really wide angle images. There's a lot of confusion here. I did not grow up wealthy at all. My dad said we came from a no-collar family, so being in an Ivy League school just in and of itself was kind of weird to start with. But here we've got a statue you would probably recognize, Native American on the horse, kind of depending on who describes it, praying, singing. And a portrait of the Earl of Dartmouth, who's the one who gave the charter for the land for the founding of Dartmouth College. Any of you have seen the Daniel Day-Lewis version of Last of the Mohicans? He's got a quick little line in there that my father sent Uncas and me to Reverend Wheelock's school, to eventually be Dartmouth College. And in 1969, I don't know if I ever told you this, my girlfriend got to dance with the current Earl of Dartmouth because that was the 200th anniversary. I didn't get to dance with the Earless or whatever she is, because she had a broken ankle. Probably good for her. But the design of the place, how can I put this? To me, says that the college, the community of that college, cares about learning, reading, doing, thinkering enough that it's worth putting in really nice carpet, fireplaces, really comfortable chairs. That this spot is where the president of the college welcomed each of us individually, not in a big classroom, but individually into the community. So it has a certain what's the name? Numinous quality. Not exactly sacred, but something that evokes quite a bit of emotion. So,
So lots of value
yeah.
for you as an
Yeah,
individual
and
to
any of you seeing it might, oh, that's nice. Must have meant something to somebody printed on that big piece of paper. Which also brings up how big selfies. Interesting, I was just reading selfies, at least in Great Britain, more people under 25 and over 45 or 50 shoot selfies. That in between group, yes, they shoot selfies, but nowhere near as many. But I find I have to have different glasses on to shoot and see selfies, because it's a kind of small screen even on the newer iPhones. This is the size of the iPhone screen should be. I want to go back. Other thoughts?
I'm curious, to go back to the fair use, would you say that fair use is such a difficult thing because documentation is so readily available and there's so many, how do you claim authorship?
Well, yes, exactly. And it's not just digital age. There was a guy, maybe you remember, who was going around to galleries photographing Edwin Weston photos, printing them, but with the frame or the little blurb tag on the side, and then putting these up as his photos. And he, as I recall, he won the case because it was obvious that he wasn't simply reproducing Weston's photos if he included the frame. You know, I'm not a lawyer, more a philosopher, but I think it does bring up very interesting questions. To go back to my older son, he and his wife just received a patent for a radically new kind of image sensor. And they have spent a year writing up a description of it, and they brought it to the patent lawyer, who actually understood it. He had been an electrical engineer before becoming a lawyer. And he said, no, we don't need all this. What you need is something that a jury would understand in 5 minutes. Yeah, that actually took them longer to make than the 180-page description. But it does bring up, well, if you start thinking in terms of, well, what if we got rid of, say, monetary value entirely, without sounding Marxist or something, would these issues come up? You know, the law in so many arenas, and particularly in this arena, is just so far behind the mechanical, electromechanical capabilities. I would really hesitate to say yes or no, but I think it's a fascinating set of questions. Yeah.
Have you thought about the behavior issues related to selfies? For example, people take a selfie while you're in danger, like someone like take a selfie and they're actually fall off the cliff or
Yeah, well, I'm more interested in the people that think it's a good idea to put up a website of all these last moment before a person dies, kinds of things. And I think that somehow seems wrong, but who am I to say? But it didn't take selfies to make people do stupid things. It's just we have more immediate evidence now. Yeah. Think of all the teenage guys trying to impress girls, between beer and fast cars. The idea that people do in fact get themselves into dangerous positions in order to take the selfie. Yeah, it happens. My guess is that selfies, well, I think they already are becoming not passé, but they're going beyond the point of, oh, here I am at the bank, here I am at JCPenney. Again, if there were 1.2 trillion of them last year, it's not trivial. I had on here, I don't want to skim through the stuff at the end, but the guys doing the running of the bulls, running in front of the bulls with the camera out doing selfies and thinking, you know what, if that seems right to you, fine. And if you get awarded the Darwin Award, don't be surprised. But again, it's not necessarily the selfie. The selfie makes it easier to get that picture, and we can retrieve it after you die. If you're carrying a film camera, and you get gored by the bull, and the bull steps on the camera, and he opens it up, and the light flashes the film. Yeah, but if we can grab the little SD card or anything out of here, we can see it. Yeah, I really like this. I've been shooting photos since before I knew how to write my letters. And in high school, I was always trying to tape or staple photographs I had taken into reports. And when my first son was born, I thought, I'd like to get pictures of the birth. Well, first of all, in most hospitals in those days, dads weren't allowed at the birth. We had a really good physician who said, of course, yeah, I can use all the help I can get. You couldn't use flash. The sensitivity of even the fastest color film was like not good enough for getting an image in birth. But I brought a little Nikon camera, loaded it with black and white stuff, and I'd been shooting photos long enough, both as a hobbyist and professional, so I knew I could have one hand helping, doing whatever, and I could shoot at least a few images without even knowing, without looking through. I could tell, okay, the baby's over there, so if I take a few like this, I'll get something. And I got 2 pictures of that where you can see the head coming out. By the time my second son was born, 6 years later, there were services all over where people would come in and film the birth for you, so you didn't even have to do it. So the kind of cultural acceptance of the process has been pretty rapid. Now that the mechanism is so much simpler, so much higher quality under the same circumstances. There are some weirdos, your son among them, who feel so romantic about the grain of film. I had, let's see, your son, a young woman that's working with me on masters in journalism, a couple other people at our house a few weeks ago. And film, the grain, I love the grain, it's so romantic. I was like, no, you pay lots more money to get a crappier image. And, it's only romantic when it works after a lot of effort. And I pointed out to our son that he's got a whole lot of digital stuff too around the film. It's what was it? I lost my mind. One quick example along the same lines, just cost. 2 years ago, I had to have a tooth extracted, and I was told, don't eat anything hard. So I went over to the it's a taco place over here, Freebirds, and I got some rice and some beans, and went outside, and there was a little bluegrass band playing, and so I just propped up my iPhone on the table outside, and got a nice recording, maybe 10 minutes of video of them. And I called up my friend Roger Wyatt, who used to be a documentarian. He shot the official U.S. government documentary of the refurbishing of the Statue of Liberty. And we just sat there. We have a little exercise. We do how much it would have cost to shoot this in 16 millimeter film. And for those 10 minutes that I shot on my iPhone, just casually sitting there, we calculated about $900 to buy the film and get it processed and get a print, a showable print out of it. This assumes that they would have let us do this, because to get that quality sound, we would have had to bring in a tape recorder about this size, a mic at least this long, and a camera. Well, my camera that I would have used weighed 28 pounds, cost $24,000. This big. They're not going to let you just walk in with that and set it up. So that cost to gain, the fact that the making of that little piece cost nothing. Yes, I had to buy the phone. I have to have a data plan. If I might want to save it to an SD card, but those are all reusable. So people get to practice more. We get to do more kinds of documents. You can always put a grain filter in if you want the look of the grain.
Relate to that question, actually makes me think of the movie Final Cut.
Mm-hmm.
When after someone has passed away, people try to construct that person's
Yep.
life.
Yeah.
And now with all this data, every minute from everywhere, especially from yourself, I was wondering from a historian's perspective and also from a futurist perspective, will that, I guess, will we be able to kind of have a more precise story of individual people's lives, or
Well,
does that
that brings up two interesting questions. What does precise mean? And who would look at this stuff? But on the other hand, I think of two things. My mom was born in 1909, and
What months?
I don't know.
What day? What hour?
Well, we don't even know. I mean, people were fudging on birth certificates, especially since she was on the Canadian border. American. We've been able to find 3 photographs of her between the time she was born and the time she was 25. Maybe a 4th one, we're not sure of. Any parent today who has only 4 pictures of their child in those first couple dozen, you'd probably be sent to jail for bad parenting. So that, but this, in a sense, goes back to the valuing. Who wants to do that? Why? When?
It's based along a similar plot. They build a program. The program goes and sifts through all the social media, collects the details, and it builds an AI that's very reflective of that individual pre-market.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's one aspect of the story arc is this teenage girl who died in a tragic accident. And it's her resurrected AI and how that goes about. The whole religion that springs up around this.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating TV show that explores exactly what you were saying.
Yeah. Yeah, I used to think I would want to have private moments going out in the woods. We went up to Lake Winnipesaukee and we did just a little hike, torn something. We're up on an 1,800-foot ledge. And just out of curiosity, crap. Which does not come from John Crapper. You look up on the web. I've got coverage up in 1,800 feet high. I was going to say nowhere, New Hampshire, but Lake Winnipesaukee is not exactly nowhere. So took some selfies up there and posted them from the top. And, okay, well, I crossed that boundary, not keeping any space sacred. The one thing that does bother me, even bothers me about my partner, is iPhone in a kayak. You pull it out like this. All you need is a little smallmouth bass, bashes the side of your kayak. Oh, oops. But that's not a philosophical thing. It's just I don't want to lose the phone.
Nowadays, it's like you don't exist if you don't.
Yeah.
Thanks.
No picture didn't happen. That's why I had to get this picture. You want to see the picture of me getting an X-ray at the dentist at 7 this morning? I was gonna.
Otherwise, we wouldn't believe you.
Yeah, it was my 3rd trip to the dentist this week. There you go, me at the dentist getting an X-ray. I was there. Actually, that's what made me think about photographing my son's birth, because it was the same thing. I'm trying to shoot like this, and the poor tech is like, "What are you doing?"
Last week, I was in Montreal for a meeting, and I took a couple hours to go to the facility there. And about 10 years ago, on 2 different trips, on the other side of 10 years ago, to Italy, and a number of churches. And the observation of the people in the church, so I sat there for about a half an hour, and I just watched the people in this facility. Now, they paid $6 Canadian to come inside, or $600 for the way it is.
Yeah, which had the better.
And so, just sitting and watching them and what they had done, that there were groups of people that came in, and of course they had their selfie stick and had to get inside the shop. And I'm thinking that when we were in Italy taking pictures, so people would take pictures of the basilica, there was no, there was, if they did take a photograph of themselves, it was somebody else with the photograph, and
Yeah.
the large place, they were the little tiny small portion. And so is it, I saw it as more that it was a documentation of the place whenever I was in Italy. And then in this basilica, it was more of a documentation of the people in the place. Because when you do a selfie, it's the people, and you have a very small amount of what's going on behind you. And then there
That's
was,
why you need a nice wide-angle lens.
and then there was a woman that she had her husband take pictures of her, probably 30, because she's like, oh, we gotta send this to them, and it's like, I'm like, okay, you send the same photo to
Yeah.
multiple people. It was like, well, this one, and okay, send it this one.
Yeah, but it's like any new technology. People try it out. Photographing dead people in the 19th century, all the rage. Nowadays, even I was hesitant to put up a picture of my dad in his casket. It doesn't seem right somehow. People used to do it all the time. But it's like any new technology. It'll be interesting. I want to do a study about 50 years from now. I want to observe what has happened to something. A little joke, I'm not going to make it 50 years. Turned 70, April 15th. Thank my mom and dad for that picture of them in front of the library. Thank you for coming. I'm not shutting you off. But, it is past the 1:30 advertised time.
Thank you.
I should make you one that's on